Welcome back, viewers at home. Now, with experience and wisdom to offer practical advice on how to manage stress and maintain your mental health amidst the hustle and bustle of your daily life, I am certainly excitedly joined by writer and motivational speaker Robin Wheeler for us to address all things stress and burnout. Good evening, Mr. Wheeler. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Maimuna. Lovely to be with you.
Now, before we get to how do we, live better, become more productive, and be more proactive when it comes to, diagnosing ourselves and seeing that, okay, Maimuna, you're quite stressed right now, you're quite burnt out, you need to do your exercises, you need to drink your water. I'd like for you to firstly take us through some of the common signs of burnout.
I'd say that, the obvious ones are a listlessness and possibly even, a lack of interest, a lack of enthusiasm, bordering on depression or anxiety or irritability over a sustained period. I mean, obviously, we have a tough hour or a tough day here and there. But when you start noticing it over a longer period of time, I think you should take note.
And now when that happens, Mr. Wheeler, what would you suggest in terms of some of the ways of, addressing it? And I think this comes to us trying to maintain that work-life balance, because you find that not everybody has the ability to go to work and come home to rest. They come home and there's other things that they need to deal with in terms of taking care of the kids, taking care of the family, amongst other things. Can you kindly advise in terms of how can we best navigate this?
Well, I think the first point there is just that we live in stressful times, and most of us are dealing with amazingly complex challenges all happening at the same time. And I think that that's something we're all grappling with in our own way. But in terms of burnout or stress-related exhaustion, I'd say that there are three basic levels involved. The one is it's the end of the year. We've been pushing through. We get to this time every year and you realize, wow, I'm really tired. I've been going at it a lot. And then there's that sort of push towards the festive season. And that would just be a case then of taking note that you're struggling, that you're stressed, that you're burnt out to a certain degree and take corrective action. But then there also there's a level beneath that where you're not really doing what you should be doing in your life, that you're actually, drifted off your primary path, or you're being pushed by life to integrate what you do with who you are, to live more authentically. And burnout can result from that. And that would be a deeper type of soul searching that would be advisable, because if you don't do it, it's going to keep pushing until you do it, And then there's a deeper level of burnout, which, all of these I've been through, so I speak from experience, where as a very creative person, or perhaps someone who's living with childhood trauma that you're not aware of, you might be in a state of overgiving as a state of being. It's actually the personality you've come to develop as a survival strategy, which means that you're in a state of constant survival and you're constantly giving, you're constantly creating to try and get a sense of self-worth or meaning in the world. And that's a much deeper thing. And that would then involve doing some deep healing on yourself so that you can come into harmony with yourself on a deeper level and then live from that place. But all three of those amount to putting yourself first, I would say, as a key solution, and then also living in the present, just being where you are, inhabiting your body, and being able to take things one moment at a time, one day at a time.
And with that being said, Mr. Wheeler, that is quite insightful, because I think at times in the hustle and the bustle, we forget that, we need to fill our cup. We need to check in on ourselves as much as we check in on other things that need our attention in this life that we're living. And this makes me now ask the fact that, in this, feeling of hopelessness, and you're feeling like, what, there is no way forward, there is no way out. I want to find out from you, how does one then reframe the thinking to the one of, optimism and motivated? Because usually you hear from people who were once depressed that it was a dark time where the light, it was so hard for them to see. The idea of, anything working out for them was just so far-fetched. How do we then, in our midst of trying to be proactive, realize that optimism and motivation?
Yeah, look, I think in that, to some degree, there's a need for professional help, somebody you can turn to, perhaps a psychologist or a counselor, or somebody in human resources, someone that you can go and speak to. I'm not, or a coach, you may have a personal coach, a business coach. I'm not really going into that territory here. I think that that's something that we all need to keep in mind as a possibility, and we all need friends, we all need people close to us, maybe one or two at least that we can turn to or just reach out to. But one of the things I've seen in myself and clients and people generally is we're all carrying a lot of emotional weight. As you said, by way of introduction, handling very complex lives under pressure. You may be a creative person, you may be a mom, you may be a father, a man. Each of those roles comes with a lot of pressure, and there isn't much time to process the emotion behind it. And I was with a client last week, and the security lady on my way out opened up to me, and I just gave her a sympathetic ear. I just gave her space to express herself, which she did verbally, and then sent me some text messages. And that seemed to change so much for her, just unburdening yourself. And I think that that's a very common thing, that we are carrying so much and we don't get a chance to express it, to voice it, and to let it all out. So that, I think, would be a very key thing to do somewhere along the way. But I think ultimately, my brand is being yourself for a living. And that's something that I've been doing for 30 years, and helping people in entrepreneurial ventures, in the corporate world, in their personal lives. You talked about work-life balance. That's the ultimate in work-life integration. And I think we're all heading towards that one way or another. The world is changing really fast. And that, to me, is the solution, where we are more authentic, more in tune with ourselves, more of service to the world, more creative, more enterprising, living on a higher level of consciousness. And that, again, brings you back to living in the present, inhabiting your body, and being authentic, and bringing that to the world as your contribution. And sometimes we get pushed really hard by life to awaken to that. We resist it. And so there are all different levels of change going on here.
Mr. Wheeler, there's something that it was quite interesting to hear, that, the things of, stress and burnout, they manifest differently to every individual. Where you find that you have a friend, you have a family member, or even a colleague who's always saying they're tired. And to them, it might be a thing of, I need to rest more. But sometimes you can find that there's other underlying issues that makes them feel like this. And this makes me want to ask you to say, what would you say in your experience of, addressing individuals and your own personal experience are the misconceptions surrounding stress and burnout? And how do you help people shift their perspective on these issues?
Well, I'd say the one is that, stress is a good thing, an aspirational thing. And of course, to some degree, if we're operating at an optimal integration of challenge and harmony, you kind of got that gradient of one, where you're going up at the optimal level. And of course, in that way, challenges and stress and growth are all a good thing. But we live in a culture of pushing ourselves to compete, to win, to fit in, to measure up to social media standards and that sort of thing. And that moving away from who we are and living in a world of ambition or aspiration can really burn you out. And burnout's not a joke. When it happens, certainly to a severe degree, I've spent 15 years ago or so, I'd had many major life events, divorce, the death of my father. I'd been in business for 15 years. And I didn't realize how burnt out I was until I took a holiday to Thailand and ended up extending it and just really sleeping as much as I could until my energy started to come back to me from within, And I think that's the gearing is for us to get out of the external world that gets sold to us and to be within ourselves and coming from a spirited, soulful place, a grounded place, and then acting from there in a way that is in line with who we really are and what the world needs, because that brings the resources we need as we go along. You don't have to push, you don't have to strain or resist. You can stay in the present moment, and that takes care of itself.
And with that, what would you say are the extreme adverse effects of, one downplaying stress and burnout, or just, really not addressing it as they should?
Well, I'd say again, on the deepest level, it would be a spiritual thing, as in you need to be true to yourself and you need to reconnect with your purpose. That could be because you've never done so in the first place, or it could be because you've lost touch with it, or your life has changed, your priorities have changed. So that soul searching element would be an integral part of living your purpose and avoiding burnout. But say on a on a more superficial level, a less deep level, but no less significant level, would just be living your life in a more balanced way, a more harmonious way, and realizing that burnout, at whatever degree you're experiencing it, is really an opportunity for rebirth. Back when I had that severe burnout and had weeks of rest in Thailand, someone referred me to a book called The Joy of Burnout by a psychologist in the UK, and it really helped me rediscover myself and rediscover my purpose, which in my case was back to what I'd discovered before, because I'd had a burnout experience in the corporate world, which had triggered me leaving that environment in a very considered way. It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It was a very considered thing. But if you don't hear these messages and you don't honor yourself, one tends to come up against bigger and bigger challenges that can be in the form of illness until you actually stop and listen. But then when you do and you find out who you are at your core again, and you start to bring that, a whole new lease of life opens up.
And now, Mr. Wheeler, I just want to find out from you this, I don't know if to call it an idea or concept of guilt of self-care. What does it mean? How would you explain it to someone who probably doesn't know much around it?
Now, that's something I've always struggled with, as a creative person. When I'm on a wave, on the crest of a wave of creativity, I'm on top of the world and everything's flowing, and in the inner and the outer are in this amazing harmony. It's that sweet spot you seek in life. But then equally, you can have lows where you're at a kind of trough in your creative cycle, and you need to just accept that and enjoy it and give yourself a break where you do nothing, or just do menial things, or just get through your day's work. And that's really difficult, because if you're a creative person, if you're being yourself for a living, then who are you if you're not making a living, or if you're not helping people, or not doing your job optimally? So your sense of identity gets attached to it, and that's where it can become a real crisis. And so again, back to that culture of performance and external validation, that comes with that guilt, where just being yourself, just being still, just having some time, in an artistic sense, like an artist's date. Even if you take one lunch a week, or your lunch every day, and you just go and you be with yourself, and you sit somewhere nice under a tree in a natural environment, all of those things nurture the inner artist, the inner child, the inner creative person, where all of your feelings and your needs churn away. And that might mean facing some guilt and looking at why you might be feeling guilty for just being yourself, which is the fundamental right we all have. That's where it all starts.
And another concerning thing in our society is the fact that male individuals are very not so open in coming out and saying, hey, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling burnout. And I believe this is a great opportunity for me to ask from you in terms of how would you best, advise, let's say, a fellow father, brother, just a male individual watching tonight, in terms of why is it so important at times to also prioritize one's well-being, even when it may feel counterintuitive?
Yeah, I think in this instance, as you point out, those kind of stereotypes about being a man, being male, those conditionings might be particularly relevant. I think both genders, as we traditionally know them, are have their challenges, and certainly as a man, one of the things that has been a big part of my 30-year career, and more silently so, which is in keeping really with what you're saying, than the rest of my stuff, is the difficulty of being a male in the world as we know it. And I feel that men are going through a massive crisis of the proportions that you're describing, and also, being a provider for family, which can often be a challenging environment, a broken family. The modern way is a very hybrid thing. And so people are trying to fulfill these roles and trying to understand themselves in both directions, hold down a career, hold down a relationship. And it's really profoundly challenging at times, But in that is a chance to awaken to our true selves and realize that we are called to fulfill our potential by being of service. And it's really important for men, I feel, to have male connections, male bonding, and there are all different kinds of relationships we have in the world. But that ability to have one or two or three male connections with whom you may discuss your stuff, like you say, learn to open up, or you may just commune and in an unspoken way have that connection. But I certainly have made an effort in my being myself for a living, in my business, in my career, to maintain male relationships, and I found it very beneficial.
Certainly. And Mr. Wheeler, as we have, addressed so many things from common sense to misconceptions, how would you best surmise our conversation, seeing that it is surrounded around stress and burnout, something that we are all affected by, whether we want it or not?
Yeah, look, I think either through illness or through conscious choice, we all come to a point where we put ourselves first and say, look, I've had enough. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of being stressed. I'm tired of being unfulfilled. And in that would be taking that leap of faith into our deeper selves and our truer purpose. There might be a few moments, when I say moments, I mean a pause in our lives where we are sort of running on empty or have a flat spot or take some time out, whichever way we manage to engineer it. It really gives us, it could be a retirement thing, it could be empty nest syndrome, all sorts of things that happen that force us to dig deeper and be truer to ourselves. And I found in myself that it really boils down to a very simple solution in the end. Again, a symptom of burnout would be overthinking and trying to analyze everything and come up with solutions. And I've learned that when I find myself getting into that space, whether it's on a day-to-day basis or on a longer-term basis, is just to bring myself back to the present, ground, work with physical presence, with being in nature, breathing, taking it one moment at a time, and then reconnecting with how much I've achieved, how well I've done, and being the parent to myself that I need, so that I can then manage myself as a whole being rather than fragmented, trying to do all of these different things at once. Just bring yourself together again and trust that you have the capacity to learn from your experience and move into a new era. So the burnout can be the seed of a whole new lease of life, as we said, or a whole new joy and a whole new meaning and a whole purpose that emerges from a so-called negative or stressful experience.
Mr. Wheeler, thank you so much, for really giving us an insight regarding all things stress and burnout, and really touching on certain things that we tend to take for granted, like that close friend or that mentor that can help you, dissect the issues that you're going through. Because sometimes you find that as a family-oriented person and you're in the business world, you feel like, okay, I can't come home with work because they don't understand what I'm going through, and it's always best to sort of engage with someone who might understand your position better. And thank you so much for really reminding us how important it is to really pour into our cup and really check in on ourselves, as you said, being our own parent. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
Viewers at home, that was my guest, who is a writer as well as a motivational speaker, Mr. Robin Wheeler, who was sharing in on how we really need to be mindful on how we are living our our days at that, in terms of investing in great circles, so that we are able to, realize the fact that, okay, now you are stressed out and now you are faced with burnout, and not having the fear of reaching out for help, because we know that the stigma that surrounds, our communities, our societies, when it comes to stress and mental health issues. And for that, we're hoping that this left you feeling different, certainly empowered. But for now, let's head over to an ad break. We'll see you just after this.